Good morning, everyone. Hi, Kevin Connor, and thanks for attending this session. I'll bring up my information here. And if you're not familiar with intermediate units, we are a regional education agency spread across the state. Our particular IU serves Allegheny County. We have 42 K-12 districts. And in my role, I provide professional development services to the 10,000 teachers in Allegheny County. We also provide services to public charters, non-public and private schools. One question we often get is about Pittsburgh Public Schools. They are served by their own organization and they have an intermediate unit number 2. Among other things, I'm Google certified trainer and a Nearpod certified trainer. And I'd like to incorporate both of those things into my courses in an LMS. But for today's session, I want to let you know that I'm also the administrator for our Canvas LMS instance. We've been using Canvas now for close to 8 years. If you're not familiar with Canvas, I would put it as the leading learning management system in both higher ed and K-12. Locally, the University of Pittsburgh and CMU have moved to Canvas in the past few years. We currently have about a dozen districts within Allegheny County that adopted Canvas when we were all needed to move to remote learning. But for the purposes of today's discussion, everything that I'm going to point out can be done in Canvas, Schoology, Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams, and even Blackboard. So I want to start off with this. No matter face-to-face or remote or blended, you can provide empowering, engaging, and equitable instruction. And I think it's important that we look at equity. I'm going to copy a link for you and put it in the chat that you can click on. It comes from the PDE's Equitable Practices Hub. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that. But the nice thing about Google Chrome is you can actually highlight text and direct people straight to that highlighted text. So I want you to look at that. And if you'd like in the chat, if there's anything that jumps out at you from that equity statement, especially the highlighted, anything that resonates with you, go ahead and type it in the chat. And I'll let you think about that as we move forward. So we're also going to look at, empowering and engaging further into the conversation here. But when we think about equity, we found out that equity meant lots and lots of things. And one of the things it meant, especially when we moved to emergency learning, was the idea of digital equity. And Pennsylvania and the federal government responded by providing funds to help schools provide equipment and connections and so forth for those students at home. If you can, At the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see a button that says raise hand. Can you raise your hand if you benefited from funds to increase your purchase of devices? Be curious to see how many folks were able to get funding for devices through that emergency funding. Oh, you don't have the hand? Oh, okay, there you go. Thank you. Yeah, good. Okay. So some folks were able to partake in that. So one interesting issue that's going to arise from that is in 3 years, you may need to replace those devices. And how will you plan for that? And will you have the funding assistance to do that? So something to think about, because those students will definitely need to keep using those devices, even if we continue, knock on wood, to be face-to-face. So thanks. Let's go ahead and move forward. And this slide here, I think based on what we just thought about for equity, we have to think about starting with the learners. One thing that came out loud and clear during that period of closure was how much we needed to pay attention to the social and emotional learning of students and teachers. We're still dealing with that. There's an organization called CASEL. I'll put it in the chat, casel.org. They have a wealth of resources. Oops. Am I not showing myself? Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go. Okay. There we go. Thank you for. Okay, you can see my slides again. Thank you for reminding me of that. So casel.org has a wealth of resources about social emotional learning. And their statement says that social emotional learning offers a powerful means to support one another during these challenging times by developing crucial competencies relating to empathy, resilience, and relationship building that students and adults need. I think the interesting thing is we always needed those. It just seemed much easier to do that in person. But I have spoken to a lot of teachers who say that in a way, during the remote learning, they actually came to know more about their students than they had known about them face-to-face. So here are some simple techniques that we can do with our learners in our LMS. Even if you're in a blended situation, there's still the need to check in with your students. So we frequently use Google Forms. Most LMSs have an excellent quiz or survey tool built into your LMS. I like Google Forms because you can pull up real-time results fairly easily. But I think we need to think about that word quizzes a little bit more. In your course, do you ask your students to go through the syllabus? And one way you can make sure they've done that is to assign a quiz, in quotes, that will check their understanding of the syllabus. You can offer, a page on how to select communication preferences and so forth. And you can, post those in the early part of your course just to make sure everyone understands how the course is going to work, how to access the materials, and then again with those check-ins, keeping track of your students' social and emotional learning. So if we look at this slide, this is the kind of output you can get when you're in a Google form. It does a great job of summarizing the data very easily and in a nice graphical format. I'm actually going to post in the chat a link to a duplicate of that check-in we have used. We use it even when we're doing Zoom meetings, when we're doing professional development, we still want to check in with our participants. So I'll give you this opportunity to go ahead and try that. It's very quick. 5 questions, and then at the end you can make any additional comment you want. Teachers, when we've shown them this, love it. They've used it pretty religiously, and they have a great feel for where the students are at on a day-to-day basis. And Google Forms, if you're not a current user, super easy to use. And you can also save the data to a spreadsheet. And you can even develop that out further. You can combine that data. You can analyze it a little bit further than what Google Forms does for you, but it does summarize in real time. So it can be very, very effective and very useful. Okay. So I'll let you try that out. Okay. And that leads us to my next point. I took the old Cool Hand Luke quote, "What we have here is a failure to communicate." It's so important in an LMS system. If you are looking to change, one of the most important things you should look at is how does communication happen within the LMS. You don't want to have to always switch over to your email just to send a message to your students. And in my experience, since the early 90s, when we had our first LMS, we went through a couple of homegrown systems. Then we finally moved to Moodle. And that became obvious that the better the communication was integrated into the system, the better it is for teacher and student. A lot of the LMSs now also have a mobile app. So again, going back to that idea of making sure your students understand all of their options, the mobile app for a student can be tremendous. They can get notifications and alerts when quizzes or assignments are due. Update it should have an integrated calendar so you can see exactly when things are coming due. And it should, no matter what message you send, it should be sent to both the web version and the mobile version. So, and you can take advantage of those. For instance, in Canvas, when you send a message to a student, if the student has elected to use their mobile phone, I don't know that as an instructor. All I know is that when I send a message, that student's going to get it. In the early days, sometimes you had what I call the creepy factor of actually texting to a student, and all the potential problems that could lead to. This way, now the communication system is kind of you don't know and they don't know how they're talking to you, but it's just happening within the system. So it will also show up in your email. If you've elected that notification, you can also have things show up in your email system. So it's pretty hard for a learner to say, I didn't see that, or I didn't know that. So now we can also think about communication in the course as from you to your students. And in Canvas, John, good point. In Canvas, you can actually record yourself audio only, or you can take a step further and make a video recording. Likewise, so can your students. So, and I've done this in my courses. Some people are hesitant to do that, but other students have said, I really appreciated being able to respond by audio or video rather than always typing in a response. It gets kind of boring. So it's good to have another option as a way. And if you're completely remote, it's a great way for the students to get to see you, get to know you a bit. Also, external tools that you can add into your LMS are Screencastify, which there's a completely free version where you can create recordings of a screen along with a little, kind of like a Zoom, where you can see your computer screen and yourself on camera, and you can point things out to your students. So if you're moving to a new unit, you might record a quick video to show them what's in the unit or something to look out for in particular. There's also an application called Flipgrid, and Flipgrid is a great way to create conversations where you post a question and then all of your students have to respond to that through a video. And then that way the students can watch videos from one another as well as you. So it can be a great tool. Nice thing too, when you send a video to your students in the LMS, when they respond, it's only to you. So you don't have to worry so much about sharing something that you might not want the rest of your classmates to know. Okay. So that communication leads us to our next point, that we need to keep them coming back. I know in the early days, especially, students, and my students are teachers, and they would just race through the course, okay? And the LMS wasn't sophisticated enough to really prevent them from doing that, or it was really heavy-handed. You could make it that no one could move to module 2 until everyone finished module 1. Well, that one student who's lagging is holding everybody up, and pretty soon the rest of the learners are pretty upset that they can't move on. So most people turn that function off fairly quickly. And let's face it, early on, most courses followed the format of read and react. Read this document and then type in the discussion what you thought about it. Then you would read the discussion, and the first person would give a very well thought out, lengthy response. And then the other 25 would go, I agree with John. It was like, gee, that was a really good discussion. So rich. Now, most LMSs now, when you do a discussion, have an option that the student must first post a response, and then they're able to read responses from others in the course. I have found that that is a tremendous benefit. You really get good responses from everyone in the course first, and then often they'll come right back and react to something they see posted by someone else. So, and you can even build that in. You can say in this section, you must post a response to the prompt, and then you must respond to at least one classmate or two, whatever you feel is appropriate. If you have a large group, two is not unreasonable. If you have a small group, it's hard sometimes to react to more than one. But one thing we know keeps them coming back is if the work's challenging. You've probably taken some online courses that weren't very hard, and it wasn't really worth your time. We used to call some courses click-throughs. It was basically just reading information on the screen, click the next one. Every once in a while, maybe there was a multiple choice question. And those were not very engaging, and you felt like you didn't learn much afterwards. So one of the big things that is emerging is that you really need your students to focus on applying knowledge, okay? And the other thing is feedback. There are studies showing that feedback keeps a student interested in the course, and also should actually help them move forward in the course, okay? There's a great clip by a guy named Dylan William, who's kind of the guru on feedback in the education world. And his line is that feedback should be forward-looking, not backwards-looking. So as he puts it, it should be more of a checkup than an autopsy. You know, you're giving someone information that will help them move forwards, not to say, well, you gave a terrible answer. Thanks, that really helps me. Not at all. Feedback provided to students should be timely. So you can't wait a couple of weeks to get back to them. It needs to be specific, hone in on certain things, and it should be actionable. When you give them that feedback, what can they do to improve? So a good rule of thumb is to provide feedback at least once a week. And as far as applying knowledge, we know, and learning theory shows, that one of the main ways is when your content draws on prior knowledge and prior learning. And then the student wants to know, well, how does all this connect to the course overall? Okay, so there are three things that can make learning, as a lot of people call it now, what makes learning sticky. So you should provide an opportunity for practice, an opportunity for application, and an opportunity for reflection. I have found in courses I've been taking more recently that those three aspects are built in, and it is really valuable to have a chance to reflect at the end of each module or somewhere in the course. It actually does make you take stock and see what you really have gotten from the course. Okay. And as always, if there's an opportunity to apply that learning to life outside of school, that makes it even more realistic, more authentic, and so on. So in my slide, there are 3 questions you can ask yourself when you're developing your module or weekly, whatever you want to call it. What is the purpose of this particular lesson or unit or module? Is it tied back to the standards? What are the tasks I'm asking my learners to do? And then what technology or multiple technologies should be used? So I think those 3 questions help you stay on track, make it meaningful. And then with the technology question, it helps you move away from using the same tool over and over. It gives you the chance to bring in new tools where it makes sense. And also, I find it's easy to forget the tools you've used over the years. And it's a good way to go back through and say, you know, I haven't used this for a while, but this would be a really good tool to incorporate into this course. So that leads us to think about universal design. And universal design comes from the world of architecture, where architects began to build ramps alongside stairs or in addition to stairs to make cuts and curves and to make sounds for traffic signals at intersections. All of those things that now we kind of take for granted. It was a good while until those truly were universal things built into our physical world. And so as instructors, we need to do the same kind of thing in our courses. We need to consider that we may not know all the various needs of our learners, so we should plan universally to make sure everyone can take advantage of the course. And one of the things you can do is make sure that you have run your materials through an accessibility checker. Again, because I use Canvas, I'm just referring it to the most. It has a built-in accessibility checker. I have here on my slides that PowerPoint has a built-in accessibility tool. Actually, I have to take my hat off to Microsoft. The amount of accessibility tools they have in all of their applications is excellent. Google has tended to rely more on third parties. But if you're a Google, I just tend to use Google more because of the ease of sharing and so forth and collaborating. For instance, I ran these slides through a third-party add-on called Grackle. Completely free. When you run your presentation through it, it points out to you things like whether or not you had a title for every slide. It's very easy to build presentations, and sometimes you forget you really haven't put a title on that. And if you just want to present a picture, you can still add a title and move it to the background. So an accessibility tool will actually tell that person, maybe they have visual impairments. If they're using a screen reader, it will tell them the title of that slide, and it will then, and you have to do this, but if you add in text to describe the picture, they will have the same experience as someone who can see that particular slide. So it definitely reminds you to think about taking into account everyone's needs, right? And we always point people to CAST, CAST.org. I'll put that in the chat. CAST, just like Castle, is kind of the main resource for social emotional learning. CAST is the main resource for universal design for learning. The amount of resources that they quickly assembled during remote learning is just amazing and super useful. During our sessions, we often point people there in case they're not familiar with CAST. Our technical assistance and consultation team at the IU, and obviously all the folks across the state who do the same job, have been using this for a long, long time. If you have access to those folks, definitely take advantage of their services. They can point out to you many things that might be a stumbling block for some of your students. Okay. And that leads us to another point, the old acronym for TEAM, together everyone achieves more. That is definitely true in a face-to-face course, and it's also true in an online course. Teamwork and collaboration sometimes might seem easier to do in face-to-face, but almost every face-to-face collaboration can be done in the online classroom through different methods. Okay. I say, this is me, that collaboration isn't always skill. You know, sometimes we talk about 21st century skills and so forth, but collaboration is and always will be a skill that's needed. And that collaboration can take many forms. It can be social interaction within the course or within your classroom, and the blend of the two. It can be those small working groups. I think we tend to think mostly about collaboration as those small working groups. Collaboration is also the students sharing their work. Depending on your course, you can learn so much from one another, and as the instructor, you get the added benefit of being a co-learner when students share their work. And again, students can learn from one another. There are times when the best thing you can do is to allow the students to work together to learn from one another. Allow them, for instance, you've probably done a jigsaw activity in a face-to-face classroom where everyone splits into groups. Each person has a role, and then you reconvene and you do that sharing out between those group members to kind of build the full picture of knowledge. You can do that online very easily. You can create a Google document for each group. You can assign each person the question to research. They all type it into that shared Google Doc. And at the end, when each team member reviews that document, they get a full picture of the question that you assigned them. They didn't have to be together at the same time. They can work independently and at different times of day or night. And yet it's still a very satisfying result. It ends up being, I think, just as good as a jigsaw done in the classroom, maybe even better, because, you know, sometimes when you're doing it face to face, there's just too many other distractions, or you just run out of time. So you've got that. Okay. Collaborative tools, again, we can look at things like Flipgrid. We can look at things like your discussion board that's built into your LMS. We can look at things like mind mapping tools. There's a free one you can investigate. It's called Miro. Again, completely free, and a really excellent tool that you can allow groups to build kind of an overall picture. You can use it for planning. You can use it for brainstorming. Lots of different uses. Padlet. If you're not familiar with Padlet, Padlet is basically a canvas. Yeah, Nina, that's a good comment. Whiteboard on Zoom. Great. We early on, we turned off the whiteboard because of all the examples of Zoom bombing that were happening. I think everyone has calmed down since then, and we've also figured out ways to make these Zoom links secure so that only the people who are supposed to get in. If you use Google Classroom, for instance, I think one of the best things they did with Google Classroom was dedicate a Google Meet, which is their version of Zoom, to that classroom. So only the students who are in that class and the teacher can ever get into that live video. So then you can use the whiteboard. But yeah, take advantage of the whiteboard in Zoom if you're doing synchronous things. I like things like Padlet and so forth, because then you've got that captured beyond that live event. Nina, do you somehow capture that whiteboard and share it back to the students, or do you just use it more for that kind of spontaneous teachable moment kind of idea? You can reply to that in the chat if you'd like. I'm going to move. I said I would do 5 strategies, but I really feel like I wanted to present one more. I call it the last mile, and that is the connection to students and their caregivers. If you're working with school-age children, even with adults though, you need to make that connection. And it goes back to the SEL, but it goes beyond that making sure, especially with K-12 students, that you're making that connection back to the home. And we found out during remote learning that home could, in some cases, be a less than positive place for some kids. So they were better off in school when they could be there. So we have to account for that, and we have to understand what's going on there. Okay. So where we derived a lot of this, when we all went into remote learning, our intermediate unit actually received funding to develop professional development that would specifically respond to remote teaching and learning. We were finding that there were lots of resources being thrown out there, but in a very kind of disorganized way. And we wanted to pull back everyone to remind them that good teaching is good teaching, no matter what. And so, but key within that is that students and staff should feel connected to a safe and welcoming school environment, whether that's physical or virtual or both. So we created a framework for remote teaching and learning. We worked with the folks at North Carolina State University, and it's called the Friday Institute. It's kind of a think tank and a professional development organization. So we developed this wheel, and you can see on the outer ring is the statement I started my session with: empowering, engaging, and equitable instruction. And we identified the 6 components within the framework. And so you might notice that we talked about social and emotional learning. We talked about student engagement aligned to the standards. We talked about flexibility and choice for diverse needs. Talked about feedback on student work, collaboration among students, and connection to families and students. And so during our PD sessions, we would share this slide. And again, it's that idea of what you do in your classroom can be done in an LMS. So there are times when you're going to do direct instruction, discussion, times when you'll do modeling. If you're remote, that's where you take advantage of Screencastify and you show them how to work through the module, or you actually, share how to do things on video or even on audio. Opportunities for research and exploration, in my mind, are even enhanced in an LMS versus in a face-to-face classroom. Building collaborative tasks, we just talked about that. Practice and review, very easy to build into your LMS course. Assessment, not a problem. You can make quizzes that work just fine. You can do formative assessment, summative assessment. And then again, I talked about providing the opportunity for reflection and that metacognitive skill building, the learning about the learning. LMSs can allow you to use things like choice boards, where you can give students multiple options to complete the assignment. Some may want to provide a written response. Some may want to record on video. Some may want to create a presentation that they can attach as a submission. Lots and lots of things you can do there. And then building in those points where you have them think about learning. Okay. So John was helpful in helping me remember, when did this all start? And it was March of 2019. My job changed overnight. I went from providing professional development in schools to small groups of people, to 8 hours a day, every half hour, changing topics, and having hundreds of people. So we ended up from March of 19 until the beginning of this, the beginning of this school year, we ended up offering professional learning to almost 12,000 people. So not only within our intermediate unit, we also did sessions that stretched across the state and actually across the country. We had folks on some sessions coming in from Louisiana and Texas, California, Oregon. It was pretty amazing when people found out about our sessions, they started to show up. But because it was grant funded, we wanted to capture things that would live on beyond those live sessions, and things that people could take advantage of, again, on their own, anytime, anywhere learning. So I have the link to the site there on the slide. I'm going to put it here in the chat again. Um, so we called it the on-ramp to remote learning, but I think you can see that it really is just about good teaching and learning. So if you go to this site, and I'm going to switch over to that, I pointed out in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see that if you want to see the content, you have to create an account. All we ask for is your name and your email. We're not asking for lots and lots of information. Because it's grant funded, we like to share with our funders. X amount of people have created accounts on the site and taken advantage of the resources that are there. That's really and truly as far as it goes. We're using it as a way to count how many people have accessed the site. So let me stop sharing this and I'll show you the remote, the on-ramp site. I'm logged in. If you go to all content, what you'll see is that we had all the synchronous PD. Obviously, that's concluded, but we do have a library of about 70 videos that you can take advantage of. They are planned out to be about an hour to go through. And each one is aligned to one of those remote learning principles. In this case, when you hover over the little icon, it tells you that one of the things it touches on here is flexibility and choice for diverse needs. It also talks about student engagement aligned to standards, and it's meant for basically the middle school range. When you go through this video, you'll see a presenter who will give you an introduction, present a concept, have you practice it, present some more information. So within each hour, there's about half an hour of the presenter, and then the exercises should take you about half an hour to conclude. And we've had very positive response to what's here. So I encourage you to create an account, or if you are thinking about an in-service day, you might think about allowing your teachers to access these materials independently or in teams, and kind of selecting their own PD for, maybe half the day. You could easily take a morning or afternoon, go through 3 of these, and have, I think, a quality experience. Under the About, you can find the framework, and that's what I shared with you earlier. And there's more information in depth. And if nothing else, you can come here and download the framework. But further down, we break down each of these areas for you to understand further each component. Okay. So I'm going to switch back to my presentation just to, oops, where'd it go? There we go. Okay, just as a way of saying thanks. And I was told to leave some time for questions and answers. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have, or if there's been anything posted throughout the session.
Kevin, I think you've done a great job of answering questions as they've come along. So right
On
now,
the fly. That's good. I'm glad I didn't miss anything, because sometimes you don't always see the chat. So I wanted to make sure got to everybody's questions. I appreciate you folks' time and attention. And feel free to contact me. I'll put in the chat. Again, if you want to contact me by email, I am Kevin.Connor, AIU3.net. So hope you have a good rest of the day. And again, thanks for coming to the session. I appreciate you taking the time to be with me. I thank the folks running the conference. And if there's nothing else, we can go ahead and conclude the session.